Hello everybody, this is Julia Alterman from Just One More Card, and I'm so pleased to be a video guest designer this month for Altenew. I'm super happy about this and so honored that I've been asked. And I want to show you how to create a no-line coloring today using these gorgeous images by Altenew. Now, no-line coloring is something that I found very challenging. You can see here, by the way, I've created some masks for some of the images that I'll be using. So I find no-line coloring challenging but so rewarding when it works out. I'm starting out by stamping this cone with Altenew, with regular Distress ink. And then I'm using my Distress markers. You could use any kind of watercolor markers that you have to color in this twig and the berries already in the colors that I want to use later on. And I'm going to stamp this right across this because this is going to be in the foreground and I can manipulate the color a little bit more later, so I'm not worried about masking this off. But now I masked off the cone and I'm stamping one of the leaves behind it. You will see that once I reveal it behind the mask. And then I'm just using my marker here to color up some of the twigs, different sizes, and stamp them. Now, as in my first step, I'm just using a brush with water and I'm going over everything that I've just stamped, at least just over the cone. Don't touch the adjacent colors because they will bleed into each other because it's watercolor basically. So always just work a section at a time, and I decided to work on the cone first. What I'm doing here is just pulling in the colors that I used for stamping, smoothing them out, and then I'm doing the actual coloring. For that, I'm grabbing my Inktense pencils, and just to be safe to mention this here, in the meantime, what I had done on the cone, it had dried, so my paper was dry by now. If everything is wet and you go in there with another color, it's going to spread everywhere. But I want to work section by section. So I let this dry, the smoothing out of the lines that I had done previously. And now I'm picking up the color directly from my Inktense pencils. You could use watercolor markers directly on the paper as well. I'm just picking it up because I prefer to do it this way. And then I'm putting down some color and then I'm smoothing it out with a clean brush. While that is drying, I am progressing on the twigs, and you can see here that I'm just going over the lines that I have stamped. I'm not adding anything, I'm just smoothing this out a bit so it looks a little bit more like I've actually drawn this. My brush is not wet, it is just damp. If it's too wet, the color is going to run everywhere, and that was not the look that I was going for. There's nothing wrong with it, it just depends on what you're going for. But I wanted to retain the detail here, so my brush is just damp, and I'm just going over the lines to create the look as if I had painted it. Now I'm progressing on the berries here, and off camera I'm dipping my brush onto my Inktense pencil, picking up the color directly from the pencil, and then bringing it to the paper here. The reason I'm using Inktense colors is because they're more intense than regular watercolors, and I wanted to have something a little bit more intense here. You can also see that I'm leaving a white spot for the highlight here, and I'm using a very, very, very fine brush with a short tip, which gives me a lot of control. I can't do brushes with long bristles because it's a mess. It just doesn't work for me at all. Now I'm coming in with a second layer of color, and this is slightly darker than my previous color. I'm adding less of it to the area than I did with the lighter color. And once more, I am using my clean brush, that's the black brush here, simply has clean water in it, and I'm using that to feather out the colors. Now, the reason I'm using two brushes is that I'm just too lazy to always completely clean off the smallest brush and then pick up the water and then pick up the color again, clean out the brush again. So it was just easier for me to use two brushes, one completely clean one and the smaller one that I always have the color on. And while I was doing this, I was actually having a slight panic attack because I was like, oh my gosh, is this, by the way, this is the third layer now with the darkest color. And I was like, so is this the front? Is this the back? Is there shadow here? Or is it not shadow here? And I was trying to create a photorealistic cone. And at some point I just told myself, you know what? Relax. enjoy this. Nobody's going to grab a cone and compare it to what I've done here. It's artistic license. So if you create a shadow where there shouldn't be one, who cares? Nobody's going to analyze that. Just have fun and take some creative license. And you know, like, this is, you are creating something. I intentionally stamped it with a very light ink so I would be able to draw in my own details. And you can see I finished here, have some very dark shadows in here and some very light highlights, and that's just how I see it. So feel free to experiment and to create shadows and highlights where you want to see them. You know, don't worry so much about creating something that is photorealistic and close to life. I mean, nobody's going to grade you on this. Just remember to have fun with this. And I really enjoy doing this. Now here on the leaf, you can see that I'm adding quite a bit of color to create nice dark shadows and then smooth it out into light highlights. I'm using my Misty to stamp the sentiment and VersaFine Onyx black pigment ink. I'm so glad I have the Misty because usually, you know, I stamp my sentiments crooked. I still do sometimes, which is surprising, but you know, like, more often than not, they're straight now, which is kind of helpful. And then for the finishing touches, I've loaded up my brush with water, and then I'm moving my bristles against the top of the pencil and I'm creating a splatter. It's really hard to see, you'll see it in the close-up later on, but I'm creating the faintest splatter of color around my arrangement here, and I just felt that this gives it more of a traditional Christmas look, like a very traditional look. You will see it in the close-up. I really like how it turned out. Now for, I wanted to have some green in the background, but I didn't have cardstock that matched the color that I needed. So I'm just using an ink pad here and running it along the sides of my panel that I die cut. You can see here, I'm smooshing it on there, and it dries rather quickly, fortunately, so I didn't have to wait long before adhering it to my card base. There we go. It's completely dry now, that's why I dare to move my hand across it. And then I use some foam tape to mount my watercolor panel on top of this. There you go. So that's actually it. But of course I had to add some additional accents, and I grabbed my Sharpie white pen, and the color remains very opaque and very white. So I added it, of course, into the highlights here on the berries, and then I created some faux snow, as if you had snow dribble onto this arrangement and collect in certain areas. So I felt that gave the card a little bit more interest. So here's a close-up where you can see how I added this faux snow, and you can also see some of the color splatters that I added to the arrangement here. Here is the cone, and you can see it's not a photorealistic cone, but everybody who looks at it will probably realize that this is a cone. And I really hope I'm using the right word here, otherwise you're not going to know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, here's the finished card. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Altenew, for having me.